A school door closes in Nazi Germany. Decades later, 4 handwritten pages sit beside a television, proposing that the screen should respond to the person in front of it. The boy was Ralph Baer. He was not a carefree dropout who abandoned school to chase a business dream. Nazi anti-Jewish laws forced him out while he was still a young teenager. His family escaped to the United States in 1938. That correction changes the story. Baer did not reject education. Education had been taken from him. What followed was not a shortcut around learning, but a long attempt to rebuild it. In New York, he worked at a factory bench. Baer later recalled earning $12 a week and spending roughly $1.25 on a correspondence course in radio repair. Parts and lessons arrived through the mail. After work, the factory worker became a student again. By 1940, he had qualified as a radio service technician. He repaired radios and early television equipment, served in United States Army military intelligence during World War II, and earned a bachelor's degree in television engineering in 1949. The supposed dropout had turned himself into an engineer. That engineer entered an industry built around a one-way machine. Television could send pictures into millions of homes. Viewers could change the channel or adjust a knob, but the screen did not react to them. It performed, and the audience watched. Baer later recalled seeing another possibility in 1951 while working at Laurel Electronics. He said he suggested adding an interactive game feature to a television project. The idea was not pursued, and then it disappeared for 15 years. In September 1966, the possibility returned in a more developed form. According to Baer's later account, the thought crystallized while he was waiting in New York. The remembered setting cannot be treated like a recorded scene. What survives is more important. A 4-page paper describing games played through an ordinary home television. Those pages contain the first major breakthrough. Baer was not trying to invent fun. Games already existed. Electronic games had appeared in laboratories and on computers before his home console work. His insight was to look at the television, an object already sitting in living rooms, and ask it to do something its owners had never expected. Instead of merely receiving a signal, it could respond. The television could become a machine for participation. But paper was not proof. A concept could sound clever and still collapse when wires, components, budgets, and company priorities entered the picture. Baer was not working inside a toy company. He was at Sanders Associates, a defense electronics contractor. Why would that company spend money making a dot move across a television screen? Sanders allowed the idea to become a modest company, supported experiment. The project budget is commonly reported as $2,500. It was a small wager on a strange possibility that interactive television might become a product. The first test was not a colorful game world. It was a controlled shape on a screen. Bob Tremblay assisted with an early controllable dot unit. That simple response crossed the line between an idea and a functioning system. A hand moved a control, and the image answered. Still, one moving dot was not a consumer product. Baer needed people whose skills could turn the concept into capable hardware and actual games. Bill Harrison helped with engineering work. Bill Rush contributed to game development. Baer led the project, but the systems emerged through collaboration. The lone genius version of the story breaks down at the moment the invention becomes real. That is the second breakthrough. Baer identified the new behavior, and the team made it repeatable. Sanders supplied equipment, time, and institutional support. Patent work documented and protected specific methods. Each part solved a different problem. The result was the brown box, a wood-grain prototype developed in 1967 and 1968. It connected to an ordinary television. Players used controllers. Switch setting cards changed configurations. Simple forms appeared on the screen, and accessories included a light gun. It was not a miniature modern console. It had no microprocessor, no downloadable code, and none of the detailed audiovisual worlds now associated with games. But it worked. Several interactive experiences could exist through one television system, and the screen had stopped being passive. Even then, the brown box was only a prototype. It faced the most dangerous distance in invention, the gap between something that functions in a controlled room and something people can buy. A prototype could prove the technology. It could not manufacture itself, reach stores, or create a market. Baer's team needed a company willing to translate the system into a consumer product. Sanders eventually licensed the technology to Magnavox. Magnavox engineered, packaged, manufactured, and sold the resulting system. In 1972, it released the Magnavox Odyssey as the first commercial home video game console. Now the pieces align. His contribution was larger than one game or one circuit. Its shape was a commercial bridge. He documented a new use for technology already inside the home. The idea became a working prototype. Sanders funded the experiment and owned the resulting technology. Patents protected specific television gaming methods and preserved collaborative inventor credits. Licensing transferred the work to a manufacturer capable of placing it in stores. That was the industry-making mechanism: concept, documentation, prototype, corporate support, patent protection, licensing, manufacturing, and retail. Baer did not manufacture the Odyssey, found Magnavox, or create every branch of gaming. He helped interactive television leave an engineering project and enter the home. The finished Odyssey looked revolutionary and limited at the same time. It used discrete electronics rather than a microprocessor or software. It generated simple white shapes. Overlays added color and scenery, while cards, dice, and accessories helped create different games. It had no built-in sound. Those limits can seem primitive now. Historically, they make the achievement clearer. The Odyssey still made a household television respond to human control. Commercial importance, however, does not guarantee cultural fame. Other branches of electronic gaming had already appeared. Tennis for Two existed in 1958. Space War followed in 1962. Computer Space reached the market in 1971. Baer had not created those systems, and they had not emerged from his project. His branch was different. It carried interactive play through the ordinary home television and into a licensed consumer console. Then Pong became the louder symbol. Nolan Bushnell attended an Odyssey demonstration before Atari released Pong. Later patent conflict is often flattened into a claim that Atari stole everything. That goes too far. Atari became a licensee rather than carrying the issue to a final trial judgment. Pong made electronic play public and visible in arcades. Odyssey sat in living rooms. One became a cultural sensation, while the other became easier to overlook. The patent record made overlooking Baer more difficult. It showed that specific television gaming methods had been documented and protected. One related patent named Baer, William Rush, and William Harrison. The documents did not grant ownership of every video game. They secured Baer's project a defensible place in the home console lineage. Recognition came slowly. Baer later worked with Howard Morrison on Simon, released by Milton Bradley in 1978. In 2004, he received the National Medal of Technology for creating, developing, and commercializing interactive video games. His prototypes, papers, and workshop materials entered museum collections. By then, video games had grown far beyond one box, one patent family, or one company. The industry would eventually generate tens of billions of dollars in annual United States consumer spending. That money was not Baer's personal fortune. His transformation was different. A boy forced out of school became an immigrant factory worker, a radio technician, an engineer, an inventor, and a nationally recognized figure in technology history. The lesson is not to abandon formal education and wait for a billion-dollar idea. Baer pursued education whenever a path opened. His breakthrough did not become an industry through vision alone. He noticed unused infrastructure. He defined a new behavior. He wrote the idea down. He built the cheapest convincing proof. He recruited people with complementary skills. He gained institutional support. He protected the core work. Then he helped move it toward a manufacturer that could place it in homes. The brown box now sits preserved, and its screen displayed simple shapes. But inside that response between a controller and a television was a new relationship with the most passive object in the living room. Ralph Baer did not create the entire gaming world alone. He helped open its front door. Subscribe for more stories about the overlooked inventors behind technologies millions of people use every day.